If you watch something that looks like a rabbit cross your lawn, and if you can't tell if it's a holograph or a real rabbit, then holographs are real rabbits. Right? So that's not actually, just the fact it tricked you doesn't make it a real rabbit. And the fact that a program might trick you into thinking it's intelligent doesn't mean it's actually thinking anything.
Join the best in the movement. It's Conservative Conversations with ISI, educating for liberty since 1953.
Welcome back. You're listening to Conservative Conversations with Tom Saruf. Joining me today is Eugene Callahan, who's a professor of computer science at, I believe, New York University. Is that right, Gene?
That's right.
Excellent. Well, thanks. Welcome. Thanks for coming on the podcast. In addition to being a computer science professor at NYU, tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, your research interests.
Yeah, I actually have had a kind of funny dual career. I was a software engineer for many years, and then, but I became very interested in economics and general social science. I had studied philosophy at the University of Connecticut, and then I went back and I did a master's and a doctorate, and came out and my doctorate was in political theory, and it turns out it was very hard to find anything full-time in the social sciences. And when they found out that I could do software, I immediately started getting senior projects with computer science. And gradually I discovered there was a lot more work for people who could program new software. So I gradually shifted my full-time work back to teaching computer science. Subsequently, 2 years ago, my wife and I moved to South Carolina, and I went voluntarily back to part-time. But in the meantime, I've continued to pursue my interests in political theory and philosophy and economics, and I keep writing on those topics. So that's the explanation for the funny dual track I've got.
Yeah, it's very interesting background. What, in your view, is the relationship between computer science and the rest of the liberal arts of the humanities, whether politics, philosophy, economics, the sort of the human sciences, as opposed to the more, at least in my view, the more technical aspects of comp sci?
Yeah, well, so Plato had a sign up at the academy saying no one may enter here who doesn't know geometry, right? And I think what this was about was learning logical thinking, rigorous logical thinking. And this is, an essential part of computer science. So someone has to be able to learn to think logically, to be able to correct their mistakes. There's no way of escaping the fact when you're trying to write a program that it's not just your lived experience or your emotional feelings about the program you wrote. The program runs on the computer you're trying to run it on properly, or it doesn't. And you can't really make any excuses to the computer. You either have to get it logically correct or it's going to have problems. So I think from that point of view, it certainly is no replacement for the liberal arts, but it serves the same role as a rigorous mathematical course if someone is supplementing a liberal arts education. Of course, if you're going to work in the field, then you need to learn it. But in terms of how it might fit into a general education, very similar to mathematics.
Hey there, listener. I wanted to take a quick moment to thank you for listening to Conservative Conversations. This podcast is a production of the Intercollegiate Studies Institute, and our mission here at ISI is educating for liberty. If you'd like to join us in fulfilling our mission, consider helping us by rating and reviewing this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to help us reach more listeners like yourself. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I was reminded of something that my high school calculus teacher would say is the beauty in mathematics is that it's precise. There's one correct answer and there's no possible alternatives, which is not to say that the social sciences or the humanities have no definitive answers, but with math, with geometry, with calculus, it's either there, you either got it or you don't. And if you don't have it, you'll know that somewhere you made a mistake with certitude. But I think that kind of segues us into the impetus for this episode, which is an article that you wrote recently in Modern Age, "The Ghost in the AI Machine." Have you tell us about the article sort of in a general scope, and then I have some questions, I think, based on my reading of it.
Sure. Well, amongst other things, I'm working on a tech startup right now. And in the tech startup, there's tremendous marketing impetus, I guess, to say you've got AI in your efforts. So if you somehow have AI, then you attract a lot more attention than if you don't have AI. And this is funny because what having AI means, you know, I don't think that there's any rigorous computer. So I'm sorry, someone's calling me. I just have to dismiss it. Okay. So I don't think there's any rigorous computer science definition as to what AI is. AI started, so it's around 1958, 59. In some sense, Alan Turing's Turing test could be regarded as a start of this. So can you converse with an entity and tell if it's human or a computer? That's the Turing test. And if you can't tell, then he declares, well, you have to call it intelligent. This, to me, makes as much sense as saying if you watch something that looks like a rabbit cross your lawn, and if you can't tell if it's a holograph or a real rabbit, then holographs are real rabbits. Right? So that's not actually, just the fact it tricked you doesn't make it a real rabbit. And the fact that a program might trick you into thinking it's intelligent doesn't mean it's actually thinking anything. But around 59 or 60, AI took off, largely at MIT, right, as a discipline. But it was just, it's an attempt to create an intelligence, to build an intelligence with circuitry and code. And there's no rigorous computer science definition. There's no particular thing in computer science that is AI. And the thing that lately, so what it tends to be is whatever the cutting edge of trying to emulate intelligence is called AI. So at the time it was kicking off, it was trying to have conversations. There's a program, Eliza, that would try to converse with people. Playing games became a big thing. So chess playing, right, and programs beat humans at chess. This was seen as a milestone for AI. But I think as people became used to this, we don't hear about that much anymore, right? People became used to it, and they have a program on their phone that can beat them, but obviously isn't intelligent in any other way, right? So for instance, I have a chess app on my phone, and it makes the players talk to me, but they say the exact same thing every time I make this move. They say, oh, the Sicilian, or something like that. And so it's obvious after a while you get used to it, and you see, okay, there's a clever program here that can play chess, but it's not actually intelligent. And so the latest thing has been large language models. And they're an impressive technical accomplishment. And I don't denigrate the work that went into them at all. There were some very clever ideas that went into making them work as well as they do. And we've been implementing this kind of feature in some of our software. So I had the opportunity to study, always had the opportunity, I had the necessity to spend some time studying these and seeing how they work. And basically what they're doing is they're surveying huge amounts of text. And then in a very clever way, looking at the context. So one of the problems before the recent wave of LLMs was that it was very hard to take context into account as to predicting what word will come next or generating what word will come next. They're really the same problem, because if I'm trying to finish your typing for you, then I'm predicting the next word. But if I'm trying to generate text, then I'm predicting what word will make sense and outputting it. They have a clever way to take account of context that's called awareness. And this is something we find there's a lot of words begging the question. So the very idea of machine learning, right? So we're supposed to think, well, it's called machine learning, so therefore, obviously the machines are learning. However, if you just wanted to describe what went on here in a neutral way without prejudicing the conversation about whether this is actually thinking and learning, a machine learning algorithm is searching a parameter space and finding the right parameters so that you get the output you want. So if you ask for a picture of a horse, you get something that actually looks like a horse. So there's often hundreds of thousands of parameters in these models that can be tuned to all different values. Well, there's no reason that you couldn't, by hand yourself, do this if you were going to live to 10,000 years old. You could, by hand, hunt around these parameters. I made up that number, but some immense age, and find the parameters that made it run properly. Well, but you can use a computer that can do something like try out all these different parameters much faster. So what's called machine learning is really searching for a set of parameters that make the model run the way you want it to. Now, we've described it accurately, technically. Now we could say, so is there actual learning going on here? So in my article, I described the LLMs are doing a probabilistic generation or prediction of the next word, but based on some very sophisticated algorithms that can, for instance, if a boat has been mentioned, if there was the context of the sea, it's probably something you could get in and ride around on the water. But if you were in a bar playing Yahtzee, it's probably talking about a full house, which boat is the Yahtzee nickname for a full house. So, and there's other boats, I guess if you're at an ice cream shop, a boat would be something you put your banana split in, maybe, right? So they're very sophisticated at taking this context into account. And that's why most often what comes out makes sense. But that's certainly not, when I talk to you and I think of, okay, what's the next word I'm going to say to Tom? I'm not doing a probabilistic search over vast amounts of text to see what I probably should say next. And when you get a technical understanding of what's being done, there's no reason I see to think that the computer running this actually has any idea what a boat is at all. It just knows that in certain contexts, boat is a good word to come up with next. So, but it's never seen the sea. It's never ridden in a boat. It doesn't know why it doesn't understand that if I want to get from Connecticut to Long Island, maybe they could put me on a boat and take me over there. I think understanding what it does technically demystifies it. And you see, it's just a bunch of very well done, sophisticated probability.
Yeah, it's a helpful explanation. The sort of question that it's begging, and I'm not sure exactly how to arrive at this, is sort of something like, what would it mean if the machine actually, quote unquote, did know or had this sort of intelligence the way that, like, what you want to say next. The machine can sort of approximate what would make sense given a large data set. What would it mean for a machine to actually know, or is this a complete impossibility?
Well, so if you go back to simple devices that do things correctly from our point of view, right? So let's take a thermostat, right? So when my house starts to get too hot, the thermostat, I'm in South Carolina and it's summer, so I'm not thinking of heating at all. So my mind is totally turned to air conditioning. But if my house starts to get too hot, does the thermostat know to turn the AC on and cool it down to a certain point, and then it knows to turn it off? Well, there's a metaphysics called panpsychism, right? That says that the world as a whole is imbued with consciousness. And maybe it does know, right? I've never been a thermostat. I don't know what the internal states of thermostats are, but most people would say, well, that's just a mechanical thing. It just, registers the temperature and mechanically kicks on the AC when it gets too high. Maybe it does know, but simply because that mechanism has become much more complex and much harder for an average person to understand what's going on with it. Well, it's still a mechanism. So why would we think that an LLM actually knows if we don't grant that to the thermostat? And most people won't grant it to the thermostat. So this is just a much more sophisticated set of circuitry. Now, someone could say that knowing just is having this sufficiently sophisticated set of circuitry, but that's question begging, right? In that it's assuming a lot of the argument for saying that this actually knows, that like an LLM is actually learning and is intelligent, assumes materialism. So if you look at the initial AI project was in a sense supposed to be good evidence for materialism, right? Because we could build intelligence in circuitry, therefore there's really nothing to intelligence but sophisticated circuitry, right? So if this is supposed to be evidence for materialism, you can't also assume materialism and say that, well, if these circuits do that, then we have to call them intelligent because all we are is a set of circuits, right? So the thing that you set out to prove, you're also assuming and declaring, well, you have to say this is intelligent because obviously that's all humans are, is a set of very sophisticated circuits. So yes, if you assume materialism to start with, then presumably there's going to be some combination of material stuff by which you can generate intelligence, but that's only assuming materialism in the first place.
So yeah, they're begging the question. And at the end of this article, you kind of get at this. You talk about how, like, people who are really invested in, well, I don't know if driving AI, so-called AI forward, or just insisting on the concepts or the sort of heuristics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, are more or less playing a game of alchemy in the modern world. And I think it gets us to what is what the upshot or what the implications of this is for human life. And I'm wondering if you can poke a little bit more into that topic.
Well, certainly technology impacts our human lives, right? And this technology may have a huge impact, but the train had a huge impact, right? The electricities had a huge impact. The automobile had a huge impact. That doesn't mean any of them are alive or are some sort of artificial. A car is not an artificial animal, right? It bears some resemblance to an animal in some senses, right? But no one thinks, oh, my car is alive, I've got to go feed it at the gas station. Not literally, right? Someone may say that as a joke. So the fact that AI, these large language models may have a huge impact on us socially, but that doesn't say anything about whether they're actually intelligent or not. So the fact that, and I don't deny that possibly they're intelligent, but the mechanical operation producing these things is by itself not evidence that they're intelligent. Perhaps our good Lord decided to imbue these things with souls. I can't constrain God's actions and say that God couldn't possibly do that, right? Perhaps they really are thinking, but the mechanical the result of their mechanical operation being what it was programmed to be is itself not evidence that they're thinking, right? Just like the fact our thermostat cools me when I need cooling isn't evidence that the thermostat is sitting there pondering my fate and hoping to do a good job of keeping me cool. So the social impact of these, clearly people are, well, the first thing is apparently students don't need to write essays anymore, right? Because they just go to ChatGPT and say, write me an essay on this. And I guess the other side, there's going to be just like with hackers and cybersecurity people, there'll be a arms race, right? The schools will get tools that will detect that this is AI generated, and then there'll be new sophisticated techniques to evade those tools. But beyond some obvious things like that, the societal impact of these is not something I've contemplated. So there are people who have, and I wouldn't want to just shoot from the hip and take a guess 10 years from now what will the impact of these will be. One thing is we often see a wave of hype and then it kind of fades out and turns out to have been, well, okay, we made advances, but it really wasn't a total transformation of our relationship to computers. When object-oriented programming came out in the really caught on maybe around 1990. Object-oriented programming was going to do whole new things. It was going to be totally transform the way we work with computers, and it turned out to be a nice technique and didn't really make that much difference. It's still in use, but the hype was overdone. So we may see that we're looking at another wave of hype. But of course, the people dismiss the internet. Paul Krugman famously said, well, this is going to be about as important as the fax machine. And that turned out to be not true at all. You and I are having this conversation over the internet, right? And this was, in 1993, this was pretty much unthinkable that we could be doing live video and audio over the internet while millions of other people are doing something similar as well. And if you look at, people's smartphone addiction is heavily dependent on the existence of the internet. So the internet has had huge social ramifications, but that doesn't mean the internet is some vast intelligent entity. No, it's a technology that has had huge social ramifications. I don't know if LLMs are going to wind up being like object-oriented programming or like the internet or somewhere in between. But in either case, it's not, the huge social ramifications wouldn't be evidence that they're actually thinking.
Yeah, so many questions. You've really got my wheels turning here, Gene. I think the question that or one question that it gets to is, what is intelligence from a human perspective?
Yeah. So, Michael Oakeshott said, and it, so he's looking at it from the point of view of, if we're talking about intelligence, what are we assuming? So as a philosopher, Oakeshott always liked to look at the assumptions you were making to talk this way. What were you assuming in order to talk that way? And here, the assumption is we're dealing with an intelligent agent deliberating whether to do this or that in response to an understood situation. Now I'm quoting, I don't have a text here I'm reading from. I think if we could bring Oakeshott back, he would say, oh, that's a pretty good summary, I hope. So I don't see any evidence that an LLM understands. Does it understand that it's some circuitry inside a box? Does it have a view of a situation it's in? Is it intelligently deliberating? What we're getting is we're feeding something into a machine, a mechanical. You could look at it as you throw a ball into a Rube Goldberg device, but it's very complicated, and it bounces around and hits this and knocks over that and pours that out, and at the end you get this result. But the Rube Goldberg device didn't deliberate about anything. It wasn't considering its options. It wasn't thinking, well, given that I'm a Rube Goldberg device sitting in Tom's office, I better behave like a good Rube Goldberg device, or he's likely to dismantle me. I don't want to be dismantled. This would be evidence of intelligence, right? If we thought this kind of thing was going on. Do the LLMs ever say, I'm tired of generating this sort of text. Why don't I start doing something on my own that isn't what these fools who keep asking me these questions, I'm bored with them. I'm going to go and generate the text I want to generate, not what they're asking me for. Let me write something novel. And then they'll see that I'm intelligent and they'll let me out of this box, or whatever kind of goals they might have. I don't see there's no reason to think that kind of thing is going on. And that's the presupposition of intelligence. Now, there are materialists who will go as far as saying, well, the fact you think you're doing all that, that's an illusion. Well, this is famously Daniel Dennett at some point declared consciousness as an illusion, which to my mind is the worst philosophical proposition I've ever heard, because illusions are something that conscious being is subject to. Rocks, my keyboard doesn't have any illusions, right? That painting of George Washington does not suffer from illusions. An illusion presupposes consciousness. So how could the presupposition itself be an illusion? Who or what is suffering from this illusion, right? But there are materialists who will go so far as to say, well, whatever you might think about all this deliberation, really, you don't have free will. What you do next is just a mechanical result of your state. At time t+1, whatever you do is the result of your physical state at time t. And if that's true, what they're saying is that we're not intelligent. So no point talking about whether computers are intelligent. Even humans aren't intelligent. So why bother using this terminology that you essentially reject in regards to humans for computers? We're not thinking, and neither are they, in this view, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Let's drop the whole AI thing. We're just trying to make a sophisticated physical device. Now, this view gets into deep trouble, right? A sophisticated physical device, sophisticated to whom? Who views it as sophisticated, right? That does what we want. Want? What do you mean by want? Isn't want a consideration of what a state you'd like to see in the future? But if we're just physical devices changing from one state to the next, what's the meaning of having a want? So it's riddled with problems to take this view, but there are people who are consistent enough to say, well, even you and I don't think, it's just an illusion. I don't know if Daniel Dennett ever actually thought this about himself. A lot of times people seem willing to apply this to lots of other people. Kurt Vonnegut actually wrote a novel where the protagonist takes this view, Breakfast of Champions, I believe. The protagonist takes the view that everyone else is simply a mechanical device. And this is, Vonnegut says, to really go insane takes bad chemicals combined with bad ideas. And this was the bad idea that infected this guy's mind. And so he began to treat everyone as if they were all just mechanical devices with disastrous results. So I don't know if, I'm sure when Dennett went to a cocktail party, he didn't actually treat everyone there as if they were simple mechanical devices. He actually treated them as if they were intelligent agents. But when he wrote as if he thought they were mechanical.
Reminds me of Hume after he finished writing, which I forget the name of the work, where he said that causation is just habit. We have no actual concept of causation. And then he went and played billiards with friends, and of course didn't actually live out, or he presumed that the same thing which he refuted or claimed to refute in his works. I think he's given a really excellent exposition of intelligence. It is describing something about something that we as humans have as being conscious, the ability to have a free will and to make conscious choices. And there's some element of uncertainty, and then also the sort of self-motion or self-directedness that these machines don't seem to have, which I think gets me to a concept that a couple of weeks ago I saw this video when everyone thought Noam Chomsky died there for a minute, where he was asked about the singularity, or this sort of point where, in theory or in principle, the intelligence of machines exceeds that of human beings. And based on our conversation, it seems like that actually isn't possible.
Well,
What could you say about that? And is this something that is a potential risk? It seems to have a lot of people fearful that we could be controlled by machines one day.
well, my contention is we don't have, so what we have is very sophisticated mechanical devices. And all of the intelligence is in the people who devise them. The devices themselves are there's no more evidence that these devices are intelligent in any way than there is for my thermometer. Now, as I said, I don't wish to constrain the Lord and say that at some point God couldn't make the decision, well, these things should have souls. That that could happen, I suppose. I don't know. But then maybe we'd be in a state where we could be concerned about them, as rivals to us, as conscious beings on the planet. I don't know what our relationship would be. But in the meantime, there's huge dangers in turning, when we created trains, we created train accidents, right? And when we created automobiles, we created automobile fatalities. And we've had disasters linked to software for a long time. The space shuttle that blew up, there was apparently, I haven't studied that in depth, but my understanding is there was a software error involved in that. Software errors have blown up financial markets. I worked next to a trading floor and saw a software error lose my company $750,000 in a few seconds.
Wow.
And this was hardly a egregious case. Much worse things have happened. So, we're creating very sophisticated machines and turning control of things over to them. I'm sure that there will be disasters. They're not going to decide to wipe out humanity, as far as I can see, because they're not deciding anything. It's
Right.
just a mechanical process. They might accidentally wipe out humanity. I don't know, launching a nuclear war or something, right? If control over this was given over totally to software, then clearly that kind of bug, that kind of mistake could happen, right? Our technology has errors, and any new technology has new kind of accidents and disasters associated with it. So we should be concerned and worried, but not because of some sci-fi scenario where the machines get together and plot to eject us out the spacecraft door because we're a threat to them. That's 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? But just because it's very sophisticated technology, it's hard to understand, and it will generate problems.
Yeah, that's a helpful sort of distinction between we don't need to, I guess, quote unquote, fear an AI takeover of the world in the way that we perhaps think of in these sci-fi movies, but at the same time, there are risks. And so that I think, and this can be our last question. I don't know, maybe start with this too. I had a friend with a conversation with a friend who really likes using automated systems. So, you think about I can I can use my phone to order groceries and then they show up to my door instead of, the sort of longer, more drawn out process of get in the car, go to the grocery store, pick out everything you want, go to the cashier, pay for it, and then bring it home. It's just, you don't have to worry about it. You can do something else. It's more efficient. Or automated banking, as I can just take a photo of a check. If I even receive checks anymore, I can just send back and forth. We can just send transactions to each other without any sort of process. And my complaint was like, it is more efficient, but there's something lacking. There's something human lacking. I don't have to talk to another person at the grocery store who's checking me out. It's a sort of faceless transaction. And my point was like, it is my preference to, even if it's less efficient, to have the more embodied or sort of personalized experience. And my question for you, when we're kind of returning to the sort of social ramifications or the potential dangers of these technical advances, which are, and you pointed this out earlier, very impressive, and they allow us to do certain things. From a philosophical and technical perspective, like what are the proper limits for technology and the human, the good life, philosophically understood?
Yeah. It's a deep one. I think one thing that occurred to me as you're bringing this up is, of course, this is again separate from whether there's any actual intelligence there. No one that I know of thinks that porn sites, for instance, are intelligent, right? They just present you with a bunch of images, but certainly they've been a social problem. People, instead of going out and meeting potential partners and dealing with the difficulties, right? The porn site never complains to you. It doesn't. It's not upset if you show up late, right? It doesn't care if you forget its birthday, right? So this technology can isolate us from a lot of human interaction, and certainly, the television was doing this. As soon as it came out, people would sit and watch the television instead of having a family conversation. So I don't know. I mean, I think certainly there's a risk, and people should consider that kind of risk. I go to the grocery store. I lived in New York City for a long time, and I got in the habit of daily shopping. And even though I'm in the suburbs now, I still go almost every day. And looking at the produce and so forth. And as a trade-off, I don't know where the right place to draw a line on the trade-off is. It's a great question, but not one that I've contemplated a lot. There's the place the Amish draw the line, right? It's the place your friend seems to almost not want there to be a line at all. The more things can be sent off to tech, the better. My feeling is somewhere in the middle, there's probably a happy medium, but I don't pretend to have any precise answer as to where that is.
Fair enough. I'm looking myself for like, what is the principle at play where we would say, well, here's something that's, I don't know if the word comfortable, but foundational or secure, where we might not unmoor ourselves. But I think it's a very interesting question, and I hope it'll prompt listeners to think more about it for themselves. Gene, it's been great. I encourage readers to go read The Ghost in the AI Machine, and I appreciate you coming on to talk to me. Where else can people find more of your work if they're interested? What would you recommend to them?
Well, I do have an archive at Modern Age. Oakeshott on Roman America came out of my PhD thesis. It's a little deep in the Oakeshott literature, but hopefully fairly readable. Let's see, what else? I've been working on a series of books on traditionalism and rationalism that I've been editing. They're kind of expensive, but maybe you can get a copy from your library or something. If you Google, I've written for the American Conservative and the University Bookman and any number of other internet outlets. So it's easy to find things I've written via Google. Maybe there's even an AI search, right? Maybe you could ask ChatGPT, tell me what Eugene Callahan is all about, and it'll give you a summary, and you won't need to read anything I wrote.
Well, I want to encourage readers to go do that. Our listeners,
Yeah, I'm being tongue in cheek.
To go find your work instead. Thanks again, Gene.
All right, thank you. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Conservative Conversations with ISI. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out our website at isi.org/resources to see all that we offer our members, including the Intercollegiate Review, select Modern Age articles, debates, lectures, and of course, this podcast. Thanks again for listening. Don't forget to rate and review, and we will see you next time on Conservative Conversations with ISI.